Now, Madam Speaker, I want to stand here and speak against this motion. It's a motion that's so based in ideology, and it would do great harm to Canadians. A carbon tax is regarded by the majority of economists and policy researchers to be the most simple and powerful tool to limit carbon dioxide emissions, based on the premise that the polluter pays, which after all is a basis for much of our just systems. It is the person who does harm pays for the harm that they do. That's what a carbon tax is based on. It's taxing polluters. Now, the price on pollution is not a new idea. Norway initiated a carbon tax in 1991, taxing 80% of all of its fuel emissions. And in fact, since then, its fuel consumption and its greenhouse gas emissions have gone down by 25%. It's not just Sweden. Other Scandinavian countries have done this. In 1997, we looked at Sweden that brought in 177 Canadian dollars a ton. In 1991, Sweden did that, which is six times what we're paying here now in Canada. And in fact, we also see that other countries like Denmark and Finland have all initiated carbon taxes in 1991. Their greenhouse gas emissions have fallen considerably, and the economies and their jobs have in fact improved and increased. Now, I just wanted to pinpoint here that I just want to say, but I don't want to just hang around and talk about other countries globally. I want to talk about our own backyard. I want to talk about the example here in British Columbia, my province, which in fact initiated a carbon tax in 2007. Now, since then, greenhouse gas emissions have gone down by 15% in British Columbia. And it has not harmed the economy. In fact, the British Columbia economy is one of the most vibrant in all of Canada. The BC's GDP increased by 12.4% of 7 years after they initiated the carbon tax. And during the 2008 recession, I think the Conservative government was in at the time when that happened, BC outperformed the Canadian average, in fact increasing their GDP by 12.4%. And in fact, we see that it is now one of the lowest GHG emitters in Canada. Now, it is now thriving in its economy, moving upward. It's created 123,000 new jobs in the green tech sector, and those jobs are paying an average of $90,000 per capita. That's pretty good money. So it's attracting a lot of young people to come here and work in green tech. It's also attracting, and it has at the moment, 300 new companies from around the world that came to invest in British Columbia. Why? Because the premise of a carbon tax, which is a federal premise, that is revenue neutral, that goes back in rebates, the rebates and the revenue neutrality created for British Columbia the ability to lower taxes on some economies and industries, the ability to lower personal income taxes, and the ability to pass on money to low and middle income Canadians who are getting back more money than paid in their own fuel consumption tax. Now, what we're finding is that because of the low commercial income tax and personal income tax, 300 companies have come to invest in British Columbia. And that is because we've also, in British Columbia, invested, which is what the federal government is also doing, investing in green technology, in these new and well-paying jobs. Now, lower and middle-income people, farmers, businesses benefited from that low tax rate and benefited from the rebates. And those went to help families, to help businesses, and to help farmers. Now, the World Bank and the United Nations have in fact cited British Columbia as it's the best best tax in the world, and it's decided that it is one that everybody should emulate. Now, I know, Mr. Speaker, that they say, the World Bank and United Nations says, BC is the model to follow if you're going to go with a carbon tax. But I know that this particular political party doesn't think well of the World Bank and actually would like to leave the United Nations. I hear that this is one of their plans. So I'm going to cite somebody else that they might find more credible, and that's the OECD. And I'll quote, the OECD says that the BC carbon tax is a textbook example of how to get it right. But you know, I would like to say that let's balance off what the tax is doing and how it's helping people and what it's done to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and talk about what the Senate committee said in its report called Treading Water. What is the cost of not doing anything? What is the cost of climate change to us in Canada? Well, apparently climate change damage it costs $700 each year to every single Canadian because of the money that was spent to actually remediate the problems that we had with the fires and with the floods. In fact, just two wildfires, and we've had wildfires now for 6 years in British Columbia. Two of those wildfires had cost $720 million in insured losses last year, making it the most costly insured extreme weather event the province has ever seen. And over the past 50 years, storms, floods, wildfires in Canada have risen from tens of millions of dollars to billions of dollars annually. And who pays that? Who mitigates it? Who helps out? It's the federal government. So that's costing us money. Billions of dollars. In fact, we found that in 2019 and 2010, the insured losses for catastrophic events went over $18 billion in Canada. $18 billion, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker. So the health costs, in fact, in Ontario alone, the health costs were shown to be $770 million last year just because of the fires that were going on in Ontario. In British Columbia, we saw that when the floods occurred, the farmers that this party says they care about lost millions and millions of dollars in farmland and in livestock, and the government had to help them. Both BC and the federal government had to put money in there to help these farmers out of their problem. 1,000 farms in British Columbia were impacted in the floods last year. 15,000 hectares of land, $2.5 million in livestock in one flood. Now, the province of BC is still trying to calculate the loss of the fires to tourism. And I wanted to just say that this is what it is. I'm not hearing anything from the Conservatives about what they intend to do about all of the extreme costs that governments have to bear, all of the problems that we face when we do that. I just wanted to say that, you know, Professor Tombe, who is an economist and public policy professor at the University of Calgary, said that if we axe the tax, as we are hearing repeatedly from these people, that what is going to happen is that, and I quote him, it would benefit the highest income bracket in Canada and be hardest on a large fraction of low and middle income families and businesses. So I want to end by quoting Mark Twain. Never let the facts stand in the way of a good story, or in this case, a good bumper sticker. So let's talk about facts. I brought the facts to the table, Madam Speaker, and let us do away with the ideology and really do the math and clearly see that BC is the best example in the world to look at what carbon tax can do. Thank you.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Peace River, Northern Rockies. I'm sorry. Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the fellow member from BC. I will bring facts to the table, and BC is a very reputable industry representative that's been very concerned about where Clean BC is going. And I'll get to my question, but the article is from their own article. BC warns Clean BC will lead to serious job losses on path to 2030. And I'll quickly quote what they say. Data suggested that BC's economy would be 28.1 billion smaller in 2030 due to the impact of Clean BC policies. Now, if you listen to the member across the way, she swears everything's going to be grand in BC. Our economy is going to contract by almost $30 billion because of policies like this. Can she please explain?
Honourable member for Vancouver Centre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think I actually said it all in my speech, but I'll reiterate it, and it came from Statistics BC and Statistics Canada, that in fact the BC economy rose by 12.4% when other economies in Canada were going down. That in fact 300 new companies since the tax has happened are now moving into BC to work in green technology. We're looking at 130,000 new jobs in BC at about 90,000 per capita. So I have no idea what the member is talking about. The statistics prove it.
Questions et commentaires, l'honorable.
Questions and comments, the honourable member for Rivière-des-Mille-Îles. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for her speech. I found it very interesting. She did rather in-depth research on the topic to justify the carbon tax. Bravo. But I'd like to hear what she has to say about the following. In the last two federal budgets, the government invested or established 6 tax credits. I say 6, for a total by roughly $83 billion. These tax credits are mainly for oil and gas companies. What's her reaction to that? Is this okay? Should this money not be invested elsewhere? She talked about climate change. Should it not be the target of these investments?
Centre.
I think it's very clear that we are not just having a price on pollution, we're also investing, as you can see clearly, in green technologies across the country. In Quebec, in BC, across the country, we are helping to build new industries. We're giving them startup funds. We're moving them forward, and they're growing extremely well. So that's one of the things that we're doing. But at the same time, some of that money has to go to paying for the costs, and I just read them out from the Senate report. The cost of fires, the cost of floods, the damage to farmers and livestock, the damage to families, that has to be reimbursed somehow. So that's a cost of not having a carbon tax. That's a cost of climate change.
Honourable member for Nanaimo, Lady Smith.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the member. First, I just want to reiterate that I agree with much of what was said around the impacts and costs of the climate crisis that are being experienced by people across the country and in my home province of British Columbia. But one thing I noted was that the member was talking about how if you use it, you should pay. And one observation that contradicts that is that we did see Suncor, in fact, with carbon loopholes, pay 1/14 of what they should have paid last year in taxes. In fact, Canada's 5 biggest oil and gas companies had $38 billion in combined profits last year at the expense of Canadians. This is why the NDP and my colleagues have been calling on big oil to pay what they owe. And I'm wondering what the member can share around why the Liberals are continuing to protect the profits of big corporations instead of finally calling out big oil and gas to pay what they owe.
The honourable member for Vancouver Centre.
I don't think the Liberals are doing that anymore. They have moved down to stop helping the oil and gas companies. And in fact, when I talked about British Columbia, one of the things that happened is that the fuel usage went down by 16%. So we're not using these fuels. We're investing in electric cars. Look at the electric cars across this country. We have a whole highway to allow for electric cars. We're putting money into the electric car industry. We're bringing down all the causes of pollution at the same time. So it's not a one-shot deal. You can't just poke at one thing. The multiple factors that go into changing greenhouse gas emissions is something that this government is addressing and the British Columbia government addressed.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Vaughan Woodbridge.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you very much,